Welcome back everyone for part 5 of our How to Play Flames of War. In this episode we are going to be talking about assaults. So a little preamble about assaults, if you will, beforehand. Assaulting, I think, is probably the most complicated part of the game, strictly because of all the variables that can be introduced on a miniature battlefield that you're seeing here. The actual steps, if you take them one step at a time, aren't really that complicated, but it is more complicated than all of the other previous steps. That said, assaulting is one of the main ways to get objectives, to deal with infantry, to deal with assault guns sometimes, to be able to run them over or crush them in assault. Same thing with infantry attacking tanks, which is very possible to do. Some infantry squads are better than others if they have a lot of Panzerfausts or bazookas. But either way, pretty much almost anything can assault anything, with a few exceptions like artillery pieces and the things that you would think logically wouldn't be assaulting an enemy, like a mortar team. They aren't charging into combat, whacking people with mortars. However, they can defend themselves. Alright, so the first thing we're going to talk about is just exactly who can assault. So it is your turn. You've gone through the movement phase, you've gone through the shooting phase, and now you're trying to figure out if you can assault anyone. Okay, so basically you cannot assault if you're pinned down or you moved at dash speed, or if you moved more than 10 inches in tactical speed. What this means is if you blitzed and moved your 4 inches and you did tactical, you're not going to be assaulting as well. If you shot at your halted rate of fire, you can't assault as well. So if if this tank had been here all turn, had fired at its main gun at its full rate of fire, it cannot assault unless it had fired in its moving rate of fire. So you have to anticipate in the shooting phase that, oh yeah, I want to assault with that tank in the assault phase. Okay. So those are basically the kind of who can assault. So as long as they didn't dash, as long as they didn't shoot their halted rate of fire, as long as they didn't move more than 10 inches, they should be good. Okay, charging into contact. So basically an assault move is pretty simple in that, well, we'll play out an imaginary first turn. In the movement step for the Americans, they moved here. Okay. And we'll imagine in the shooting step they shot a bunch of machine guns and nothing happened. So in the assault step, I asked myself, alright, did they move more than 10 inches? No, they didn't. Did they shoot at their halted rate of fire? No. So they didn't dash. So I'm good to assault. So what I'm going to do is charge into contact. So the way that this works is any team that is within 4 inches of an enemy team can move into contact. So, for example, if the best I could have done was this, and I wanted to assault with this Sherman platoon, I could move him, I could move him, I could move him. Now notice I have to touch the target I'm assaulting by moving 4 inches. If it's more than 4 inches and I can't touch an enemy team, he's not moving, he's not assaulting, he's not part of the assault. Alright, so that's moving into contact. And there is one minor addition if you're assaulting with infantry. Infantry can basically double stack. So if the Germans were assaulting, I could move him into base contact and then move him into base contact directly behind him. So if he's in base contact with him and he's in base contact with the target, that's okay. Now you do need to have the front facing being as close as it can to the other one, so you can't be doing weird stuff like this to maximize it. You've got to kind of straighten that up so that infantry is facing correctly. Now that said, the infantry could be assaulting this way, but typically you move straight into base contact. Okay. So after you've moved into contact, the next step is defensive fire. So on the German side, so it's the Americans are going, but the Germans who are being assaulted can now conduct defensive fire. Basically, any team that is within 8 inches of an assaulting team can contribute defensive fire. So that means that this Panzer IV can contribute to defensive fire. These guys are just beyond 8 over here, so they cannot contribute. So most of the time these infantry are, at its most basic, they have just hand grenades and their guns and things like that. But sometimes you might have teams that have Panzerfausts or bazookas. We're just going to talk about the basic assault first, or basic defensive fire first. So we look at the defender and the attacker. So the person who's assaulting is the Sherman. Anyone who shoots is going to be hitting side armor, even though it looks like it's the front armor. Up close, you have all kinds of angles, you can do all kinds of damage, so you're going to treat it as short range. Now, Panzerfaust has an anti-tank rating of 11, which can definitely hurt and penetrate a Sherman. A standard infantry team has an anti-tank rating of 2, which cannot hurt a Sherman. Anti-tank 2 side armor of 4 for a Sherman means that the Sherman's going to have a 4, roll a d6. No matter what, they're going to be higher than that anti-tank 2. The only infantry that could possibly stop them or hurt them would be the ones that have a Panzerfaust in this example. And since he's within 8 inches of him, he can contribute a main gunshot. Well, actually 2 main gunshots, because he gets to shoot. Everyone gets to shoot in defensive fire as if they are halted. So let's say we have a Panzerfaust here, and we're going to go ahead and shoot that. Now, normally these American tanks are hit on a 4, so that's what we're going to look for. And our German player rolled a 2. And then over here, our Panzer IV is going to be firing 2 shots, also needing a 4, because again, the normal line of sight for shooting applies. So he's within 2 inches of the hedge here, so that's not going to provide concealment to the Sherman. So let's see if we can get some 4s. Oh no. So they failed. The Germans failed with their defensive fire. Now you can force the attackers to fall back. If they're vehicles, like we have in this example, you need to destroy or bail out 2 of the teams to force them to fall back. If it's infantry that's assaulting, the defenders in defensive fire need to score 5 hits. Now whether that kills a team, they fail their save and kills the team or not, 5 hits is the magic number, and then that will make the infantry fall back. So in this example, let's say instead of everyone missing, the Panzer IV scored a hit and the Panzerfaust scored a hit. So we'll say this guy got bailed out and this guy was destroyed. So that is 2 or more tanks destroyed or bailed out. So this assault has failed, and the Shermans have to fall back. Basically what they're going to do is fall back 2 inches. And even the bailed out guy gets to fall back 2 inches. It's the same thing for infantry. If infantry has to fall back because they're repelled, they have to fall back outside of 2 inches from the teams they tried to assault. Also keep in mind that when you fall back, you have to do it shortest distance necessary to get outside of 2 inches from the person you tried to assault. Okay, let's assume that we'll go with our original example. Our Shermans made it through, the Germans had missed all their defensive fire. So now that defensive fire is done, the attacker gets to take a swing or attack its target. So what you do is you look at the skill rating, and you see the skill rating is trained 4+. So we're going to need a 4+ to score a successful hit. Now close combat is very deadly. Against infantry and gun teams, there are no saves that the defender gets to take. So for example here, we're going to roll, and we got a 1, so he failed. He did not squish that guy. The next tank failed, and the third tank failed. Wow, that's like how I roll in a real game. So let's say instead he scored a hit and he scored a hit. So the team that is in contact is removed as destroyed. Pretty brutal, right? Now that team is fine. So the next thing you would do is you would check to see if the German player can counterattack. And what you do is you look at that unit's motivation. In this case, the motivation is going to be a 4+. And again, on your card, you see motivation up here at the top. So we're going to see if that German player can motivate. He got a 3 and he needed a 4. So he's going to have to fall back. But this time, his fallback move is going to have to take him at least 6 inches away from those victorious Sherman tanks. So they would have to break off 6 inches. And that's everybody. And why is it 6 inches? It's because the victors get to consolidate 4 inches. And what that does is, even if they move forward their full 4 inches, there's still a 2-inch gap between those units, and it maintains that rule of tanks can't be within 2 inches of infantry or gun teams. So that's why they have to break off. But let's go back. Let's say our teams, our Germans here, they rolled a 4 for their counterattack. So at this point, they were successful in their counterattack roll. The German player could choose. Maybe the German player realizes this is a losing fight and he wants to break off. Or he can continue the fight. I don't want the Americans to get to this objective. So in that case, what we can do is we can move anyone that's within 4, so 4 inches gets me into contact. And then anyone who can move 4 and contact someone who is in base contact. So all of my remaining Germans can participate in assault. Now, for assault, there's 2 different ways that we can attack tanks. One is going against their top armor with just improvised weapons, hand grenades, whatever. And the other is if it's a weapon team like a Panzerfaust you'd find here, or a bazooka team, Piats for the British, they could use that as well. So let's pretend this guy has a Panzerfaust. And these guys are all regular teams. So they're also going to hit on their skill. So their skill, we're going to say, is a 4-up. So those 2 guys hit that tank once. These 2 guys hit their tank twice. And then this Panzerfaust, he needs a 4 to hit. And he gets a hit as well. Okay, so our Germans are mad apparently here. So these normal guys, these non-Panzerfaust equipped guys, they're using an improvised weapon which is anti-tank 2, and that goes against the top armor of the Sherman. So that miss we'll get rid of. So the Sherman has a top armor of 1 on the Sherman, anti-tank rating of 2. So the Sherman, the American player, is going to roll an armor. So 1, the top armor, plus 4 is 5, which is higher than the anti-tank rating of 2, so that hit bounces off. We scored 2 hits here against this Sherman, so we're going to roll 2 saves as the American player. And we got 2 more saves. Really, the only way in this situation that the American player would suffer would be if they rolled a 1. And in that case, top armor 1, anti-tank plus 1 is 2, anti-tank rating is 2, they equal, and in this case they're considered to have automatic firepower, so that tank is going to be bailed out. And then last but not least, over here, that Panzerfaust has an anti-tank rating of 11, I think. That's what we'll give it for this example. Side armor is 4 on a Sherman, so I need a 6, and even with a 6 I'm not going to be successful. It's not going to be successful. So he goes straight to firepower. The firepower of the Faust is a 5+. He gets a 1. That tank is also bailed out. So it's an interesting position for the Americans. They only have 1 active tank and 2 tanks bailed out. Now they can still try to assault, and they're going to take a motivation test of 4+. They rolled a 1. That's too bad. So that means that the American tanks have to fall out of 6 inches, at least 6 inches away, of those German teams. Now you notice these guys are bailed out. They can't move. So at the end of the assault, these tanks, because they're not outside of 6 of these victorious Germans, are automatically destroyed. Okay. So that is the basics of assault. Keep in mind that there are a lot of permutations, fighting over hedges, fighting through woods, things like that, that you'll want to keep in mind. For example, if you're fighting in woods, vehicles need to make a cross check before they swing or move every time. So it's very dangerous to assault infantry in woods with tanks. And that lends one of the combined arms elements to Flames of War that's so cool, and gives you some of that World War II flavor. You know, tanks are great at dealing with other tanks and dealing with infantry out in the open, but if there's dug-in infantry, like in a woods or infantry inside a building, you know, it's going to be very hard to assault into the woods, and tanks can't assault infantry in a building. So that's when artillery comes in, or your own infantry to assault. And it adds a really interesting and fun dynamic to the game. But like I said, it is one of the more complicated rules to learn when you're starting out in Flames of War. So once the assault is done, these 2 tanks are destroyed because the Americans had to fall back. The Germans could consolidate. They could move up 4 inches. They could fall back their 4 inches. It's up to them. But regardless, they are pinned down for having participated in an assault. The tanks don't have to worry about that because they are armored teams. They can't be pinned down. Otherwise, if it was 2 infantry platoons going at it against each other, they would both be pinned down. All right, folks. Well, there you go. That's a look at the assault phase. I hope this shed a little light on it, and I don't mean to intimidate you by saying that this is the most complicated part of the game. However, if you are starting out, I would recommend you do tank versus tank battles first. You know, maybe for your first couple of games, and just really get comfortable with the movement aspect and the shooting aspect. Because when you're doing tank versus tank, they can't assault each other, so there is no assaulting in the game. Assaulting does add some time to your game, and it does add more complexity, but like I said, it's a lot of fun, and it is definitely worth it to use those rules. But like I said, try tank versus tank first, and then slowly add some infantry in. The starters are really good set for that because it's got 1 American paratrooper platoon and a couple of Panzer Grenadier platoons, so it's got a little bit of mix for you besides just tanks. But otherwise, I would recommend you check out that Flames of War rulebook. There's a lot of other things that are in there that I did not cover. I will have more advanced or intermediate how to play, where we'll go over things like artillery and airplanes and AA and missions and things like that. You'll also find on my website I have done list building videos. We'll be doing some more that are geared more towards beginners, as well as some more advanced lists as well. But so that's what you have to look forward to. So let me know, guys, down in the comments below what you think of you know, this series. What do you think of the assault phase? Any old hands there have any recommendations or anything I might missed for beginners? Please let me know down in the comments below. Also, please do consider giving us a like and subscribe. That helps the channel a lot. Also, click that bell to receive notification when we release new content. As always, we appreciate you watching, and keep on wargaming.